You're watching France24. It's time now for our daily look at the international papers. Eve Irving joins me in the studio. Good morning, Eve. Let's go Latin America first. And in Venezuela, some rather loud voices are being raised against President Hugo Chavez.
Absolutely. We've seen great protests again this week, now against reforms that he's proposing that will end the limit to a presidential term and things like this. So we're seeing that come a lot in especially the anti-Chavez papers this morning. The press are concerned because some of his proposed reforms include ideas for forms of control over the media. El Barracoy de Caracas runs with the headline "An insufficient police presence," and they focus on the high motivation and the incredibly high turnout of the protesters, saying that the police, against them could do little or nothing. And it doesn't look, Catherine, like the protests are set to end here. They could continue for quite a while to come. As El Nacional tells us, another protest is being called for on November 1st, and it goes on to explain that Chavez will put his reform proposals to a referendum, but the protesters are angry because he wants to call this referendum on the 2nd of December, and they say it's too early, too many people aren't sufficiently informed to make the decision at that point. Finally, El Universal make the same point as the other papers, but they go on to point out that it's an awful shame in Venezuela that the protests are getting so much coverage, and everybody's talking about should Chavez get an extra 7 years term in office, when really they should be focusing on the unemployment and the housing crisis, the real problems of the country.
Well, protesters there in Caracas were wearing T-shirts that just said no, so we've got an idea of what they're going to vote in the referendum. Meanwhile, Eve, here in Paris, everybody's getting their brains rather hot about the environment. Tell us why.
Absolutely. Today is the start of the two-day conference, the National Summit on the Environment. So that's being covered, naturally enough. It's getting the front page of the French daily Libération. It's hoping to launch France on an ecological revolution. Ideas such as putting stickers on the food so people will know the amount of carbon dioxide that was emitted producing that and things like that are being suggested. Libération tells us on the inside page that 80% of French people would be in favour of more environmentally produced products even if they cost more. It tells us that 63% say they would not take an aeroplane if there was another form of transport available, even if that meant a longer travel journey. And 1 in 2 say that they're ready to leave their car at home and take other forms of transport into the city.
Well, as I use my bicycle, I have to say I would doubt that statistic.
Yeah, I was a little bit dubious about that as well.
Finally, Eve, you promised us something about health. Tell us more. Cashew nut a day or something like that?
Exactly, Catherine. Well, I love this because I absolutely hate the dentist, like perhaps many other people. But there's a man in North Carolina who tells us that a cashew nut a day could keep the dentist away. Charles Weber has tested it for us. On 4 occasions, he made cashew nuts part of his diet for 24 hours, and he says it eliminated the decay in his tooth each time. The idea is that nuts have an acid that are lethal to bacteria.
Goodness me, well, I have as many doubts about that as the French leaving their car at home, to be honest, but that was in the Independent. Anything else that you could tell us about it? I mean, you're saying...
There's a long list in the Independent. There's a cure for love sickness. Apparently you can take 2 hormones and that'll cure that. And did you know that showers could be very bad for you? If Hitchcock didn't get you into the bath, this might, because there's a manganese elements that when we breathe in can be lethal to the brain and can produce symptoms such as Parkinson's disease.
Right, so everyone stop washing then, basically.
Exactly, stay dirty.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Eve Irving, for that review of the papers. Stay tuned to France24.